I know how frustrating and expensive and time-consuming it can be to have to keep retaking GED math over and over and over again, so my wish is to help everybody watching this pass so that they can move ahead to bigger and better things in life like college or a better job. Know that I heard from a student who suffered from epilepsy, but eventually she persevered and she burst into tears of joy when she finally passed, and I want that kind of success for you too. Which of the following is false? Is it A, 44 raised to the first power equals 44, B, 789 raised to the 0 power equals 1, C, 5 to the 9th divided by 5 to the 4th power equals 5 to the 13th power? What about D, 8 raised to the power of 5 times 8 raised to the power of 3 equals 8 raised to the power of 8? Or E, 8 raised to the 5th power times 8 raised to the 5th power equals parentheses 8 times 8 parentheses raised to the 5th power? So try to figure this out. Which one of the following is false? Okay, so let's go over how to do a question like this. A, 44 raised to the first power equals 44. So this is a power rule that you'll just want to memorize. If you don't believe me, you can just check this in your calculator. Any number raised to the power of 1 just gives you that number. It doesn't matter if it's 987, whatever, pick any random number, raise it to the power of 1, that's just equal to that number, in this case 987. So here 44 raised to the first power is equal to 44. So, sorry, I should cross this out because this is correct, which means that it can't be the right answer because we're trying to find which one is false, so that's why I crossed it out. Now B here, 789 raised to the 0 power equals 1. This is another power rule that you should know. Okay, 789, or any number for that matter, raised to the 0 power is going to give you 1. Doesn't matter what it is, you could pick 23 raised to the 0, that's going to be 1. Just put any number in your calculator, pick something at random, and raise it to the 0 power, and the answer is going to be 1. So this is a true statement, meaning it can't be the correct answer here because we need to know which one is false, so I'm going to cross B out as well. Okay, so let me skip C here, hint, hint. Let's look at D here. Okay, so if we have two of the same bases, what we can do is we can add the exponents. So 8 raised to the 5th power times 8 raised to the 3rd power. Since the bases are the same, really this is the same as doing 8 raised to the 5 plus 3, which is equal to 8 raised to the 8th power. Okay, so what I want you to remember is that any number, if the bases are the same and you're multiplying, all right, you just have to add the exponents up. So E is also a true statement if you have the same bases, the same exponents, all right? In this case, 8 times 5, 8 raised to the 5th power times 8 to the 5th power. That's just the same as parentheses, 8 times 8 parentheses raised to the 5th power. We already said that D is correct, so that leaves us with C. C is false here, all right? And why is C false? Well, it looks like what we did here was 5 to the 9th divided by 5 to the 4th. It looks like we added the exponents, and really you need to subtract. So if you've got something like this, a division problem where both the bases are the same, this 5 to the 9th divided by 5 to the 4th, that is really the same as 5 raised to the 9 minus 4 power. All right, and 5 raised to the 9 minus 4. What is 9 minus 4? That's 5. So this is really the same as 5 raised to the 5th power.
Hello friends, I'm Michelle. Some of you recognize me from Purely Persistent, and I'm going to answer a couple of these questions here with Parker. The price of Sadie's meal before tax and tip was $18.32. Sadie paid 7% tax, then added a 15% tip to the total. How much did Sadie pay for her meal? Please round your answer to the nearest cent. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is take our $18.32 and we're going to times that by 7%, which is really just 0.07, okay? And we get here $1.28. That's how much she's paying in tax. But we're going to add the total. So we're going to take this $18.32 and add that to the tax. Whoops, 32. And we get $19.60. Now, Sadie's a nice person and she's providing the tip after tax, not before tax. So we're going to take her tax. Let's change colors here. We're going to go 19.60 times the tax, which is 15%, so 0.15, and we get $2.94, and it does have a little bit after that, but we're just rounding, okay? So we're going to take the 1960 and the 294 and add them together. So bring this down here, 1960, add them together, and we get $22.54, and as you can see here, the answer is C. I used a calculator, which made this a little bit easier. You can do it by hand, but really knowing how to do the calculator is critical for the GED or HiSET test.
What is the approximate value of side C of the triangle? A, 18.2, B, 8.6, C, 3, or D, 74, or is it E, 5,476? Now, in case you're on a cell phone or a small device where this is hard to read, this number is 7, this number is 5, and this says C. So let me turn it over to you. I'll have you try this out if you'd like to, so you can pause the video and then we'll go over it. Okay, so hopefully you had a chance to try this out here. And for a question like this, you're going to want to use the Pythagorean theorem formula, which is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So this formula is going to guide us through the question here. So as we can see in the formula, this side of the triangle is our A. So over here, that corresponds to 7. So I'm going to plug 7 into the formula for A. So I have 7 squared plus what? Plus b squared. Now, this side of the triangle down here is side B. And on my triangle for the example here, I see that side B is 5. So I'm going to put 5 into the formula here in place of B. 7 squared plus 5 squared equals C squared. 7 squared is equal to 49, and 5 squared is equal to 25. So we have 49 plus 25 equals C squared. So if you add these up, 49 plus 25, and you can use a calculator if you want to, that's going to be 74. So 74 equals C squared. Now, whenever I teach a Pythagorean theorem question like this, there are some common mistakes that students make here. So I'm just explaining these again. I'm not trying to, pick on anybody here. I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad. I just want to make sure that you know how to do this right so that if you get a question like this on your test, you'll maximize your score. So you don't have to spend time and money retaking the test over and over again. So that's why I am, really trying to drill this point home. If you thought D was the correct answer here, you did one really good thing. The thing that you did right was you got to this step right here. So pat yourself on the back for making it this far and getting to 74 equals C squared. But just know that we're not quite done here because we're asked in the question to find side C. This is telling me here that 74 equals C squared. So this step here, we found C squared, but we need to find C. All right, so again, if you made it this far and you thought D was the right answer, good job, you were on the right track, but there's still a little bit more to the question here. So another common mistake would be to get to this step here, and then to think that the way to get C squared is that you have to do 74 squared. So if you did 74 squared, you probably thought that E was the right answer here. Okay, and this is a really common mistake. So by all means, do not feel bad whatsoever if you made this mistake, because over my many years of doing this on YouTube, I've been doing this since I think 2017 on YouTube. I tutored for several years before that, but I've been on YouTube, and since I've been on YouTube, I've seen people make the same mistake over and over and over again. And a lot of questions where I teach this problem, it seems like somebody always does this and tells me about it in the comments. The way that you do this, you don't want to do 74 squared, okay? You don't want to do that. So that's actually incorrect. And again, I'm not picking on you if you made this mistake. I'm just pointing this out so you know. The correct way to do this, once you get to this step, is you have to take the square root of both sides. You have to take the square root. That's going to undo this power of 2. So we would then find that the square root of 74, if you use your calculator, comes out to a number very close. It's 8.6, and then a bunch of other numbers after that. It's like 8.60, and a bunch of other numbers here. But we don't care about those other numbers because we just have to find the approximate value of side C. And we'll see that 8.6 is approximately equal to
side C, so B is the correct answer here.
A sub shop serves custom-made subs where guests select cheese, vegetables, and meat to be added to their sub. If there are 4 cheeses available and customers may pick any 2 cheeses for their sub, how many different combinations of cheeses are possible? A, 8, B, 6, C, 99, or D, 24. So let's have you pause the video if you'd like to try this one out, and then when you're ready, we'll go over how to do it. Okay, so this question is a combinations question, and the part of the question where it says, how many different combinations of 2 cheeses are possible? This word combination should be a clue to you that you want to use this formula here, and it is n factorial divided by r factorial times n minus r factorial. And you might be wondering, what in the world does this mean? So don't worry, this is not as complicated as it might look. So basically here, it tells us that customers may pick 2 cheeses. So the total number of choosing objects in the set is just going to be 2. So r is going to equal 2. N is the total number of objects, and since here there's 4 cheeses available, n is going to be 4. But it's not as simple as just plugging 4 into the formula for n and 2 into the formula for r. This exclamation mark here, or exclamation point, whatever you want to call it, it means that instead of just putting 4 into the formula for n and being done with it, you actually have to do 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Now, I'm not going to write the times 1 here because anything times 1 is just going to be itself. Same with the bottom of the formula here too. Instead of just plugging 2 into the formula for r, you would have to do 2 times 1. Now, since 2 times 1 is just 2, I'm just going to leave that as 2 here. Now, for the parentheses here, we have to start off by doing n minus r. So what is n minus r? Well, 4 minus 2 is just 2, and let me simplify this even further. So what is 4 times 3? 4 times 3 is 12. What is 12 times 2? 12 times 2 is 24, and 2 times 2 down here on the bottom is 4. So we can simplify this to 24 divided by 4. And what is 24 divided by 4? 24 divided by 4 is 6, so B is the correct answer here. What is the slope of the line represented by the equation 6x plus 7y equals 9? So let's have you pause the video. This would be a good time to try this out. And if you get stuck, don't worry, we're just going to go over it. And let's have you try it. All right, so hopefully you had a chance to try this out. So for most slope questions, this is going to be the formula to guide you through them. And right here for this question, we need to recognize this formula in order to get the question right. The formula is y equals mx plus b. This little m here, this is the slope. So in this formula, if we want to find the slope of the line, we basically need to figure out what is the value of m. The first move that I'm going to make here is I want to get the 7y by itself on the left-hand side of the equation. So I'm going to subtract 6x from both sides of my equation here. Now, the reason I'm subtracting is because it's positive 6x, so I have to do minus 6x to get the 7y by itself on the left-hand side of the equation. Now in math, whatever you do to one side, you also have to do to the other. So I also have to subtract 6x on this side too. So when I rewrite, I'm left with 7y equals minus 6x plus 9. Okay, so hopefully this makes sense so far. Now, we don't want 7y, we just want y. So since it's 7 times y, the opposite of times is division, and so I'm going to divide to get y by itself. But whatever I do to one side, I also have to do it to the other. So I have to divide everything on the right-hand side by 7 as well. So I'm going to do negative 6 divided by 7, positive 9 divided by 7. All right. The 7s are going to cancel out on the left-hand side, and I'm just left with y equals negative 6 over 7x plus 9 over 7. Now, if we were asked to find the y-intercept would be this 9 over 7 here, but we're not asked to find that. We're asked to find the slope. So remember, the slope is this little m. It's the number in front of the x. So this negative 6 divided by 7 here, this is our slope, and that corresponds to answer choice C. So C is the correct answer to this question.
Okay, the next question says solve 4x squared plus 5x minus 9. Answer choices are x equals negative 9 over 4 and x equals 1. B, x equals negative 19 over 4 and x equals 15. C, x equals negative 12 and x equals 5. Or D, x equals negative 4 and x equals negative 15. So let's have you try this out. It doesn't hurt to try. If you don't know how to do it, don't worry. You're going to learn how to do it here. So let's have you pause the video and try it out. This is what we call a quadratic equation. When you have a quadratic equation like this, the first number in that equation is whatever is in front of this x squared is what we call a. And whatever is in front of our x is what we call b. And whatever's left out here is what we call our c. And so what we're going to do is we're going to factor this quadratic equation. And what you do is you think about it this way. You make a little x or a diamond like this, whatever you want to call it. And on the top part of the diamond, you're going to write a times c. And down here is going to just go b. So let's start by doing that. So we know here that our a is 4. And we know that our c is negative 9, right? Because remember, we have to take that minus sign into consideration. So here's our a, here's our c. So what is 4 times negative 9? 4 times negative 9 is negative 36. So I'm going to put this here in the top of my x. Now, what do we plug in down here? That's just our b. So the b is whatever is in front of our x, which is 5. So I'm going to put a 5 down here. Now you might be wondering, well, so what? What does this accomplish? Well, let me tell you. We have to find two numbers that will multiply together to give us negative 36, but they have to add up together to be 5. So a good way to start would be, let's just list out numbers that you could multiply together to get negative 36. So one would be, let's think of pairs of numbers that would multiply together to give us negative 36. And one pair would be 6 and negative 6. So if you do 6 times negative 6, you're going to get negative 36. But if you add these up, what is 6 plus negative 6? Well, that's actually going to be 0. So this pair is not going to work because we need something that's going to give us 5. So what about negative 9 and positive 4? Negative 9 times 4 is going to give us negative 36. So it passes the first test. Now let's add these up. Negative 9 plus 4 is going to give us negative 5, not just 5. So this isn't going to work because this is going to be negative 5. So now let's try it the other way around. Let's try positive 9 and negative 4. So positive 9 times negative 4 is going to give us negative 36. Now, let's add these up. 9 plus negative 4 is really the same as 9 minus 4, which is going to be positive 5. So this is the pair that we want to use. So I'm going to put one number here, and I'm going to put the other number right here. It doesn't matter. You could write 9 here and negative 4 here. Doesn't matter. We're just kind of doing this just to keep track of the numbers. So now what I'm going to do, and this is the part of problems like this that often confuses people. All right, so don't worry if you're confused. We're going to work this out right now. All you want to do is just pick one of these numbers. Let's start with negative 4. And I want you to write x minus 4. If it was a positive 4, you would do x plus 4. But since it's minus 4, you write x minus 4. Now you go back to the original question and you look what number was in front of the x squared. The number in front of the x squared is 4. So we have to take this negative 4 and we have to divide it by 4. All right, so what is negative 4 divided by 4? That's going to be negative 1. So I could rewrite this as x minus 1. And I'm setting this equal to 0 here, and I want to find x. So x minus 1 equals 0. If I want to find x, in other words, if I want to get x by itself, I have to cancel out this minus 1. And I do that by adding 1. And whatever I do to one side, I have to also do it to the other. So I would get x equals 1 as one of the solutions to the equation. Now, so I dealt with my -4, so now let me deal with the +9. So we're going to start by writing x plus 9. Okay. But now I have to look back here at the number that's in front of the x squared. It's 4, so I have to do 9 divided by 4. And I have to set this equal to 0 here. All right, so without simplifying this, we don't have to do any math here because we can look at the answer choices and see that they've left their answers as fractions, so there's no need to plug this into your calculator or anything like that. What you can do now is, let me try to bring this up a little bit. It's going to bring the whole problem up. Okay, let me clear some room out. So basically, what I want to do is I need to get the x by itself, so I need to subtract 9 over 4 from both sides of my equation here. Okay, so when I rewrite this, I would get x equals -9 over 4. All right, and so the answer is going to be A because my solutions are x equals -9 over 4, which is right here, and x equals 1, which I found down here.
Okay, the next question says, what is 70% of 350? Is it A, 230, B, 75, C, 245, or D, 390? And let's have you pause the video, give this one a try, and then when you're ready, we'll go over it. Okay, so there are different ways to solve percent questions, and I'm going to show you one method here. I think this method is pretty easy. At the end of the day, you have to do what works best for you. It says 70% here in the question. So that tells me that I'm going to go into this formula and I'm going to replace the percent sign with the number 70. It says of 350. So I'm going to take 350 and I'm going to plug it into the formula here in place of. So what's going to go into the formula for is? Well, that's actually what I'm trying to find because it's asking me what is. So I don't know what goes in is, so I'm just going to put an x in here. And now we're going to basically plug the numbers in, and we want to rearrange this so that we've got x by itself on one side of the equation, and that's going to tell us what number is. So since it's x divided by 350, and I want to get the x, I want to multiply by 350. Now, why would I do that? Well, watch this. If I have 350 divided by 350, that's going to equal 1. 1 times x is just x. So I've effectively got the x by itself on the left-hand side. But whatever I do to one side, I also have to do it to the other side. All right, so I have 70 divided by 100 times 350 now. Okay, so now what I want to do is you can just put this in your calculator if that's easiest for you. And if I do that, the answer is going to be C, 245.
What is the equation of a line that passes through the points 1, -10, and 2, 8? Is it A, y equals 12x plus 28, B, y equals 18x minus 28, C, y equals 8x minus 2, or D, y equals 9x plus 74? Let's have you pause the video and give this one a try, and as always, if you get stuck, don't worry about it. We don't care for right now whether you get this right or wrong. It's all about the knowledge, so let's have you pause the video and try it out. Okay, so there's two formulas that we want to use to figure out this question. The first is the slope formula, m equals y2 minus y1, all over x2 minus x1. So when we put a 1 here to indicate that you want to start with this formula here, and you want to calculate the slope, and then once we know the slope, we're going to use that and plug it into the point slope equation, which we'll use second. All right, so if you're completely lost, don't worry. Let me show you the first step here. So the first step is to calculate the slope. So what I have to do is I've got to look at my pairs here. I have 1 and -10. Now, the first number in a pair is always an x coordinate. So this 1, I'm going to call this x1. And this -10, I'm going to call that y1 because the second number is always a y. Now let me look at this pair right here. So this 2, what do you think I'm going to call that? Well, I'm going to call that 2 x2. And this 8, I'm going to call the 8 y2. So simply put, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my y2, which is 8, and I'm going to plug it into the formula here where it says y2. And I'm going to take my y1, which is -10, and I'm going to plug that into the formula here for y1. What do you think I'm going to do after that? Well, I'm going to take my 2, which I labeled as x2, plug it into the formula for x2. And lastly, I'm going to take my x1, which I labeled the 1 right here, and I'm going to plug that into the formula for x1. Okay, so let me show you how I would do this. So m equals y2 minus y1. So what do I put in for y2? Well, remember, I'm going to put 8 in for y2. So it's 8 minus my negative 10. So here's a little trick here. Minus a minus is the same as plus. So instead of doing 8 minus negative 10, I can just write it as 8 plus 10. All right, and I'm going to divide that by x2 minus x1. So x2 is 2, and x1 is 1. So it's 2 minus 1. 8 plus 10 is what? 8 plus 10 is 18. 2 minus 1 is just 1. 18 divided by 1 is just 18. So what did I figure out? Well, I just figured out that my slope is equal to 18. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this m, this 18, and I'm going to substitute it into the formula here in place of m. So let me now use the second equation. So it's y minus y1. So what do you think I'm going to plug in for my y1? Well, since I labeled negative 10 as y1, I'm going to plug that in. So it would be y minus negative 10. Now remember I said minus a minus is the same as plus. So really I'm just going to write that as y plus 10. So this is equal to my slope, which I just calculated, it was 18, times x minus x1. And my x1 is 1. So I have x minus 1. So there's two ways to do this now. You could start by handling the 10 over here, or you could start by distributing the 18. So I'm going to start by distributing the 18, just personal preference. So I would do 18 times x, which is going to be 18x, then 18 times negative 1, which is going to be negative 18. So I have y plus 10 equals 18x minus 18. Now you could have also dealt with the plus 10 first. I decided to deal with that last. But what I'm trying to do here, I need to get y by itself on the left-hand side of the equation. So I have y plus 10. The opposite of plus is minus, so I do 10 minus 10. Whatever you do to one side, you also have to do to the other, so I'm going to subtract 10 over here from the 18. All right, we've got to work with like terms here. So I can't do 18x minus 10 because the 10 doesn't have an x, but I can do minus 18 minus 10. Okay. And so now what I'm going to get if I rewrite this, I am going to get y equals 18x minus 28. So my answer is going to be B.
Determine the mean, median, mode, and range for the following data set. 8, 9, 3, 8, and 2. So let's have you pause the video, try to figure this one out, and then when you're ready, we'll go over it. Okay, so let's go over how to do this. And to start, we're going to first figure out the mean. So the mean simply means the average. So to find the average, I want to add up all of the numbers in the number set, and then I'm going to count up how many numbers there are in the number set total, and I'm going to divide by that number. And if it sounds like I'm speaking a different language, like from another planet or something, don't worry because I'm going to show you how to do this. Mean, median, mode, and range questions are fair game for science, for math, and for social studies, so you're probably going to get something like this at some point on your test. All I'm doing here to calculate the mean is I want to take each number. As you can see, I've got my 8, I've got my 9, all right, I've got my 3, I've got my 8 and my 2. I'm just adding up all the numbers, and then I'm going to count up how many numbers there are. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's why I put the 5 downstairs here. So you add up all of the numbers in the data set and you divide by 5. And if we do this, if we put it in our calculator, we're going to find out that the mean is equal to 6. Okay, so to start off, we know that the mean is 6. So now let's go to the median. So what a lot of people do sometimes, I've seen, when I did a lot of in-person tutoring, I saw a lot of students do this, and a lot of people will look at 3, and they'll say, okay, well 3 is the middle number, so it must be the median, and they'll think D is the right answer. And first of all, let me say that if you made this mistake, don't worry about it right now. I'm not picking on you by any means. I just want to make sure that you know how to do this, so that way on your test you can get as many points as possible and you can move on faster. But just know that I like the thought process. I like that you probably remembered that the median had something to do with the middle number. And so you looked for 3 and saw that, hey, 3 is right in the middle here. So I like the thought process, but we have to take it another step further. And what you have to do first is you have to put the numbers in order from smallest to largest. All right, so 8 is actually the median here. So let's talk about the mode next. The mode is the most occurring number in the data set. Get it? Mode, most. The mode is the most occurring number in the data set. So we see that 8 shows up twice. All the other numbers only show up one time, so 8 is going to be our mode. The biggest number is 9. The smallest number is 2. So if I subtract them, 9 minus 2 is 7 here. So the range is 7. So the answer that's going to be correct here, the mean should be 6, the median should be 8, the mode should be 8, and the range should be 7. So answer choice A is the correct answer.
Please answer the following question without using a calculator. So what I'm going to do is order of operations. And so we have please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So the P is parentheses, E exponents, multiplication and division, those guys are buddies. Addition and subtraction, those guys are also buddies. First thing I'm going to do is what is in the parentheses. So here I have 20 minus 10 is just 10 squared. And I like to rewrite everything. 10 minus 8 is 2. Next, exponents. So we have our 10 squared. So really that's just 10 times 10, which is 100. And again, rewrite all of it. Multiplication and division. So I have 4 times 2, which is 8. Addition and subtraction go from left to right and just go on through. So I have 100 plus 18 is 118 minus 8. 118 minus 8 is 110. And look, here's our answer, B, 110.
Okay, the next question says, which table represents a function? Is it A, B, C, or D? Let's have you pause the video, give this one a shot, you never know, and then we'll go over it. Okay, let's talk about functions now. So a function relates an input to an output. And to teach this, I'm going to show you an imaginary soda machine here that functions very unlike a soda machine would in real life. So with this imaginary soda machine, let's say that every time you put $1 into the machine, you always get out a Sprite, all right? And let's say every time you put $2 into the machine, you're always going to get out a Diet Coke. Now let's say every single time you put in $3, you get a vitamin water. And the point here with this imaginary soda machine is that $1 will only ever get you a Sprite. So every time you put $1 into the machine, you're always going to get a Sprite. Same with the $2. $2 will always get you a Diet Coke. You're not going to put in $2 and get a Monster. You're not going to put in $2 and get a water. You're not going to put in $2 and get a vitamin water. $2 will only ever give you a Diet Coke. Okay? So this is parallel to, or this is a metaphor for what happens with a function in math. I think metaphor is the word I want to use here. I don't know, but the point is that this example here with the soda machine is very similar to how to what we're trying to do here with understanding which table represents a function. So in other words, with a function in math, each input has exactly one output. You're never going to put, the same input into the machine and get 2 different outputs. All right, just like you're not going to put in $3 and get out a Monster and a Coke and a Sprite, you're only going to get one output every time. So if we look at A here, the X's, the X's not just in A in every case, the X's represent the inputs, what you're putting into the function, and the Y's represent the output. Okay, So here, this is telling us that if we put in -2 as an input, we get 3 as an output. But also, if we put -2 in as an input, we get 18 as an output. So you could put -2 in and there's 2 different outputs. Well, this is not going to be a function because remember, that would be like putting $3 into the machine and getting a Sprite or a Monster or a vitamin water. So what about 2 here? We see that or what about B? We see that if we put in 2 as an input, we get 3. But it also shows us that if you put 2 in, 8 is also an output. So this is not going to work. All right. Again, that's like trying to put $1 in and getting a Sprite, a Coke, a Monster, or this or that. No, it doesn't work that way. The function soda machine, every time you put that $1 in, you only ever get that Sprite. So what about C here? Well, it looks like for C, we put in 2, we get 3 as an output. We put in -5, we get 3 as an output. We put in -1, we get 8 as an output. We put in -2, we get 18 as an output. So for each input, there's exactly one output. Now, I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking, well, how come we have 2 output 3, -5 output 3? Well, the outputs can be the same. We don't care if the outputs are the same. We just want for every input, there has to be one output. All right, it's okay to get the same output for different inputs. So in other words, it'd be okay, let's say maybe you put in $3, you get a vitamin water. You put in $5, you can also get out a vitamin water. There's 2 different inputs. 5 and 3 are both different inputs, but it's okay if they have the same output. So it's okay if 2 and -5 have the same output, but it wouldn't be okay if, for example, over here, 12 and 12 have different outputs. That wouldn't match, all right? That would not work. So C is the correct answer.
Okay, the next question says multiply 3x minus y times 4x plus 7y, and we've got answer choices A, B, C, and D. So let's have you pause the video, give this one a try, and then when you're ready, unpause the video, and we'll go over how to do it. So to get a question like this right, we're going to use what's called the FOIL method, and it stands for first, outer, inner, and last. So let me break down how to do this in case you haven't studied this or in case it's been a while. So I want to look at each set of parentheses, and I want to look at the first number in the first set of parentheses, and then in the second set of parentheses I want to look at the first number there too. So I've got 3 and I've got 4, so I want to start by multiplying the first number inside each of the parentheses. So what is 4x times 3x? Well, that is going to give me 12x squared. So don't forget that instead of just doing 3 times 4, we also have to do x times x. X times x is going to be 12x squared. So that takes care of the first. So now we want to do the outer. So for the outer, I want to start with this 3x here. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do 3x times 7y. So what is 3 times 7? Well, 3 times 7 is 21. And what is x times y? Well, x times y is best left as just x times y. So that takes care of my outer. So now I want to look at the inner 2 numbers here. In this case, I've got -1y, or just -y, and I've got 4x. So what is -1 times 4? -1 times 4 is just -4. What is x times y? X times y is just simply xy. All right, so since we've got 21xy and we've got -4xy, I'm going to line them up on top of each other here. And this will become 17 because 21 minus 4 is 17. So I can really rewrite this as 12x squared minus 17x y. So I've done my inners. Now the L stands for last, so the last 2 numbers that I haven't multiplied yet, that's what I'm going to do last, which would be -y and 7y. So -1 times 7 is -7, and y times y is y squared. So I've got -7y squared, and this whole thing is going to match up with C. So C is the correct answer to this question. What is the slope of a line that is perpendicular to 7x plus 4y equals 12? Is it A, B, C, or D? Let's have you pause the video, try this out, and then when you're ready, we'll go over it. Okay, so Again, we want to start, since this is a slope question, we want to start with this formula, y equals mx plus b. And the first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to figure out what the slope of that line is. So we're going to take this formula and we're going to rearrange it into the form y equals mx plus b. And we're going to find the slope, but we're not done yet. There's another step we have to do since we want to know about perpendicular for this question. So what I'm going to do here is I want to start by getting the y by itself. So let me just right off the bat get rid of this 7x. So since it's positive 7x, if I subtract 7x, I'm going to cancel this out. But whatever I do to one side, I also have to do it to the other. So I'm going to have to subtract minus 7x from the other side as well. And I still have that positive 12 there. So I rewrite this as 4y equals negative 7x plus 12. Now I want to deal with this 4. So if I want to get rid of the 4, since it's 4 times y, 4 divided by 4 is just 1. 1 times y is just y. But now what I have to do is divide both numbers here by 4. Since whatever I do to one side, I also have to do it to the other. So I could rewrite this as y equals negative 7 over 4x plus 12 over 4. Now 12 divided by 4 is the same as 3, but we don't have to do anything with this 12 divided by 4, so I'm just going to leave it like this. What we really care about is this number right here, which is our slope. The negative 7 over 4 is the slope, but since we need to figure out what is the slope of the line that's perpendicular, we have to flip this upside down and change the sign. So whenever you find the slope and you need to know what is the slope of a line that's perpendicular to that equation, you have to take the opposite reciprocal. So that's a fancy word for flip it upside down. So instead of 7 over 4, I make it 4 over 7. And since it was negative 7 over 4, I make this positive. So you take the opposite reciprocal, the opposite. This is negative, it becomes positive, and you flip it upside down. So it becomes 4 over 7. So the correct answer here is A. Nick is shipping one package that weighs 10 pounds and 8 boxes that all weigh the same. In total, the shipment is 118 pounds. What is the weight in pounds of each box? Is it A, B, C, or D? You know the drill by now. Let's have you pause the video, give this a shot, and then we'll go over how to do it. Alright, thank you for sticking with me so far into the video. So basically here what we need to do is we want to write an equation here. So it tells us that he's got one package that weighs 10 pounds and 8 boxes. But we don't know how much each box weighs, right? That's what we need to find. But we know that there's 8 of them. So let's say 8 times B, where B represents the weight of just one box, right? So since all boxes weigh the same, if we find what that weight is and multiply it by 8, it tells us the weight of 8 boxes. We add that to the weight of the package, and that will add up to be 118, right? Because it tells us in total the shipment is 118 pounds. So we have this equation here, and all we have to do now is we have to solve this equation for B. All right, so and when I say solve the equation by B, all I mean is we have to get B by itself on one side of the equation. So first, I would subtract 10 from both sides of the equation. 10 minus 10 is 0. 118 minus 10 is 108. So I can rewrite this now as 8B equals 108. And again, the name of the game here is to get B by itself. So it's 8 times B. What do I need to do here? Well, I need to divide by 8. Because if we've got 8 times B, the opposite of times is division. 8 divided by 8 is 1. 1 times B is B, so the 8s are really canceling out here. But whatever I do to one side, I have to do it to the other. So I have to do 108 divided by 8. And if we throw that in our calculator, we'll see that B equals 13.5 pounds. And so we know that C is the correct answer here. The next question says, what is the value of f of x equals 9x cubed minus 2 when x equals negative 3? Is it A, negative 938, B, negative 245, C, 241, or D, 928? So that's up to you to decide. I'll let you pause the video, give this one a shot, and then as always, we'll go over how to do it. Okay, hopefully you had a chance to try this. So whenever you see a question like this, I know this can seem kind of confusing, but all you're really being asked to do here is to substitute -3 into the equation for x. So if I were to rewrite this, I would rewrite it as 9 times -3 raised to the third power minus 2. And -3, so what is -3 cubed? Well, that's the same as -3 times -3 times another -3. So -3 times -3 would be +9, but then when I multiply +9 by -3, what I get is -27. So I would rewrite this again now as 9 times -27 minus 2. And if you plug this in your calculator here, 9 times -27 minus 2, the answer is going to be B, -245. Simplify 15x plus 13 times x minus 1 in parentheses. Please put your answer in the box below. Now, I know you obviously can't literally write your answer in this box below, but just imagine you could. And let's have you pause the video, give this one a try, and then as always, we'll go over it. Okay, so the trick here is you have to distribute this 13. So you would distribute it to the x, and then you distribute it to the -1. And yes, you do have to take this minus sign into consideration. So rewriting this, I would have 15x plus 13x, because 13 times x is 13x. Then I have 13 minus 1, which would be minus 13. So now what I want to do is I want to add up the like terms. So 15x and 13x, since they both have x's, I can add them up, and that would be 28x minus 13. And since the 13 doesn't have an x there, I can't subtract 28x minus 13, so I just leave it here, and this is all I can do. I can't simplify any further than this, so this would be the correct answer. The next question says, what is the area of the following triangle? Now this side says 7, this side says 50, and this is a question mark. I didn't give you the side for the question here, and I'm reading this to you in case you're on a phone or a small screen device, so in case it's hard to see these numbers, and I've given you answers A, B, C, and D. Now let me warn you, this is a hard question, so if you get stuck on this one, don't worry about it, okay? Don't beat yourself up, because this is, in my opinion, the hardest one on this test so far. So let's have you pause the video, give it a try, and then, like I said, don't worry if you don't get this right. You're going to learn from it. We're going to go over it. Okay, so to get this question right, there's actually a few things that you have to be aware of here, and the first is that this is a triangle question, and we have this little 90-degree angle, this little box down here, which represents a 90-degree angle, which means that this is a right triangle. So we may be able to use the formula for the Pythagorean theorem, which is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Now, this formula is not directly going to give us the area. So why am I showing you this formula here? Well, we don't know what this side is equal to, right? This side is one big question mark. And we know that side A is 7, and we know that side C, the biggest side of the triangle, is 50. But we don't know what this side is. However, we can figure it out. All right, so the other formula that is going to be relevant to this question, though, is the formula for the area of a triangle. So I'm going to put an A to represent area. I'm going to put a little t here to represent triangle. So this stands for the area of the triangle. That's equal to the base times the height of the triangle, all divided by 2. Another way to write this would be half times the base times the height. Okay, that is another way of writing the exact same thing. So however you want to look at it, base times height divided by 2, or half times base times height. There's two ways of saying the same exact thing. So these are the two formulas that are going to be relevant here, and this formula up here, this a squared plus b squared equals c squared, we're going to use this formula to figure out what the unknown side of the triangle is. Then once we know what both sides of the triangle, both sides down here of the triangle are, we can do base times height divided by 2 and get the answer. All right, so if it seems like this is really complicated, this is really confusing, let me break it down and put some real numbers to this, and hopefully it'll make more sense. So we're going to start with this formula right here, like I said. Now 7, we can conveniently plug into the formula for A. And 50, we can plug into the formula for side C, which would look like this. 7 squared plus b squared, and I'm leaving this as b squared because we don't know what this side is down here. So let's say that this side is b. We don't know what b is, so I'm just going to leave it right here. All right, and that is equal to 50 squared. Okay, so what is 7 squared? 7 squared is 49. So I'm just rewriting this as 49 plus b squared. And what is 50 squared? 50 squared is 2,500. All right, so now what I'm doing, or what I'm going to do, is I'm going to take this 49, and I want to get rid of it. So I want to subtract by 49 from both sides. Or in other words, I want to take 49, subtract from both sides. All right, now why am I doing this? All right, why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I want to find b squared by itself. And if I figure out what b squared is, I can take the square root of both sides, and if I do that, I'm going to be able to figure out what the missing side of the triangle is. Why do I want to figure out what this missing side of the triangle is? Because then I can go up here and use the second formula, and that's going to give me the answer. So now we figured out what b squared is. B squared equals 2,451. So what I want to do is take the square root of both sides of our equation here. So the square root of b squared just gives me b. The square root of 2,451 is 49.5. So we now know that the missing side of our triangle is equal to 49.5. So why is this information helpful? What's my next step? Well, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the base and substitute it into the formula for b. And I'm going to take this 7, plug it into the formula for the height. So let me rewrite this now. So we know that the base is equal to 49.5 and the height is equal to 7. And if I divide by 2, what does this tell me? Well, it tells us the area of the triangle, because formula 2 is the formula for the area of the triangle. So that's going to give me A if I put this in my calculator. So basically, just a quick recap, because this is kind of hard. What I had to do here is I had to take formula 1, the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I had to take the 7 and the 50, and I had to use them by putting them into this formula here, and I had to solve for b. Once I found b, b told me what this side of the triangle was equal to. In other words, b was the base of the triangle. Once I had both the height of the triangle and the base of the triangle, I plugged them both into the formula for the area of the triangle. I did the base times the height divided up by 2, and A is the correct answer. For which value or values of x is the function f of x undefined if f of x equals 72 plus x divided by x plus 12? Is it A, x equals 0, B, x equals negative 12, C, x equals 19, or D, x equals negative 20? So now would be a good time to have you pause the video, give this one a shot, and then we'll go over how to do it. Okay, so these questions do come up on the test, and this is an important topic to understand, but this can be a little confusing for some people, so let me break it down like this. When we see this notation, f parenthesis x, all that means we just read this as f of x. And the f is the name of the function. Now it could be g, it could be h. Typically it's just going to be f, but just know that it could be g of x too. That does happen, but this out here, this letter is just what we call the name of the function. Now what about the x, or whatever's in the parentheses? That is what we call the input. So we already kind of talked about this concept a little bit if you remember when we did the function soda machine question, where I went off on a big spiel about putting inputs into the machine and getting out an output. Well, here the x is just the input. All right, we've got f is the name of the function, the x is our input, and all of this stuff out here, this is our output. Okay, and the idea with this question is that we need to figure out which value of x is going to make the function undefined. Now, there are two cases when a function is undefined. Okay, the first is when you have to divide by 0. So I'm going to abbreviate this. I'm just going to put div for division, divide by 0. Okay, you can never divide by 0. And if you don't believe me, just take out your calculator and just pick any random number. Let's just do 10. Put 10 divided by 0 into your calculator, and your calculator is going to give you an error message because you can never divide something by 0. Now, you can go the other way. You could do 0 divided by 10, and the answer would just be 0. Okay, but you can never have anything that you're actually dividing by 0. That's going to give you an error, all right? The other case is when you have a negative under a square root. All right, so let me just put this I'm going to abbreviate this negative number under a square root. All right, so if you're taking notes, this would be a good thing to add. So the two cases that are going to make a function undefined, if you have a 0 in the denominator, in other words, if you're trying to divide by 0, or if you have a negative number underneath the square root. Okay, and so I should also mention that whenever you have a fraction like this, the top part of the fraction is what we call the numerator, and the bottom part is what we call the denominator. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the denominator and I'm going to set it equal to 0. So I have x plus 12, and I'm just going to set this equal to 0, and I want to solve this equation for x. Again, when I say solve the equation for x, that's just, a fancy way of saying I want to get x by itself on one side of the equation. So I have x plus 12. I want to do the opposite of addition here, which is subtraction. And that's going to get the x by itself on the left-hand side. But in math, whatever you do to one side, you always have to do it to the other. So I have to subtract 0. I have to do 0 minus 12 to subtract 12 to the other side too. So I end up with x equals negative 12. Now, what does this tell me? Well, if you go back to the original question, 72 plus x divided by x plus 12, if you put in negative 12 for x here, it's going to make the bottom number 0. All right, so watch this. If I do 72, and then instead of x here, I write negative 12. And then down here on the bottom, instead of writing x here, I write negative 12 plus 12. All right, negative 12 plus 12 is going to be 0. All right, and so we have 72 minus 12 divided by 0, and this is an error because we can't divide by 0. If x is negative 12, the function is going to be undefined, because if x is negative 12, you would have a situation here where you're trying to divide by 0, and that is an illegal move in math. You're not allowed to do this in math. It won't work. So basically, B is the correct answer here. So to simply put, if you get a question like this, you just take the denominator here, take the bottom, take everything from the bottom, and just set it equal to 0 and solve for x. And the majority of the time, that is going to give you the right answer. Which answer choice represents the inequality graphed on the number line? A, x is less than negative 2. B, x is less than or equal to negative 2. C, x is greater than or equal to negative 2. Or D, x is greater than 2. Let's have you pause the video, try to figure this out, and then when you're ready, we'll go over how to do it. And again, no worries, no pressure, let's just see how it goes. All right, let's talk about this one. So note here that the arrow starts at negative 2, and it goes to 5, and it just kind of keeps going. And also note here that at negative 2, we have a closed circle. The closed circle tells us that negative 2 is going to be included in the range of values here. So if I were to draw a little stick figure person right here above negative 2, note here that if the person were to walk this way to the right, what happens to the numbers? Well, they go from negative 1 to 0 to 1 to 2 and so on and so forth. So we see here that the numbers get bigger as we go to the right. As we follow the arrow from negative 2 to 5, the numbers are getting bigger. So let's look at A. A is telling us that x is less than negative 2. Well, if that were the case, then the arrow would be pointing this way to the left. The arrow would be going through the smaller numbers, the numbers that are decreasing, which is not what we see. And that's the same with B. B tells us x is less than or equal to negative 2. That is also not the case, so A and B are out here. Now, D tells us x is greater than 2. And this is also not the right answer because the arrow doesn't start here at 2, or it says x is greater than positive 2. The arrow doesn't start here at 2 and keep going. It starts back here at -2. All right, so note here that the right answer is x is greater than or equal to -2. And this answer includes the -2 in the range of values here. That's why it's not just x is greater than -2. It's x is greater than or equal to -2 because the closed circle tells us that -2 is included in the range of values. So this question, let's have you try this without a calculator. It says, between which pair of decimals should 5/8 be placed on a number line? Is it A, 0.4 and 0.5? Is it B, 0.5 and 0.6? Is it C, 0.6 and 0.7? Or D, 0.7 and 0.8? So again, let's have you try this without a calculator. You could pause the video, give it a shot, and then when you're ready, we'll go over how to do it. Okay, so to answer a question like this, the first step I would recommend is to look at the fraction and just figure out, is this greater than or less than half? Okay, that's always a good first step here. Now, to do that, you look at the bottom number in the fraction. The bottom number is 8. So what is half of 8? Well, half of 8 would be 4. So I have the fraction 4 over 8 here, and I want to compare 4 over 8 to 5 over 8. Now, really the key to getting this question right is to understand the skill that when two fractions have the same denominator, you can figure out which one is the bigger fraction by which one has the bigger numerator. So in other words here, these fractions both have an 8 downstairs in the denominator. So I look up top here and I see we've got 5/8 and we've got 4/8. Well, 5 is bigger than 4. So 5/8 is bigger than 4/8. And since 4/8 is equal to half, we know that 5/8 is greater than half. So 5/8 is greater than half. And why does this matter? Well, it matters because half as a fraction is equal to 0.5 as a decimal. All right. So again, all I did here is I looked at 5 over 8 and I thought about the fact that if it was 4 over 8, it would be equal to half, but it's 5 over 8, so I know that this fraction is going to be greater than 0.5. All right, 5 over 8 is greater than half. Half is equal to 0.5. So this lets me take answer choice A out of the question here. So if you're having a little trouble following what I just did, it might be a good idea to just rewind the video, watch it maybe slowly, just think about it here because this is an important skill. And if you got that, then great job. The next thing I would do is we want to figure out, we know that 5 over 8 is bigger than 0.5. But we next want to see, is it greater than or less than 0.6? If 5 over 8 converted to a decimal is bigger than 0.6, then we would know that B is the wrong answer here. So how do we do that? Well, let's compare 5 over 8. Let's compare that to 0.6, and then if we need to, we'll compare it to 0.7. So how do I write 0.6? That's a decimal. How do I write that as a fraction? 0.6 is equal to 6 over 10. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to get a common denominator. So we've got 5 over 8 and 6 over 10. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, 6 over 10 has a 10 in the denominator. So I'm going to multiply both the top number and the bottom number of 5 over 8 by 10. And if I do that, I get 50 over 80. Now down here, I have 6 over 10. I look up at the 5 over 8 fraction. I see that there's an 8 in the denominator. So I multiply the top and the bottom number of this fraction by 8. And again, all we're trying to do is we need to compare 5 over 8 and 6 over 10. And I need to get a common denominator. And then we're going to see which fraction is bigger. So 6 times 8 is 48. 10 times 8 is 80. So now we can compare the two fractions. 50 over 80 is bigger than 48 over 80 because 50 is bigger than 48. So which fraction is bigger? Is it 5 over 10 or 6 over 10? Or I'm sorry, is it 5 over 8 or 6 over 10? Which one's bigger? Well, we know that once we got a common denominator, we saw that 50 over 80 was bigger than 48 over 80. So this tells us that 5 over 8 is greater than 6 over 10. So let's rule b out here, because we know that when we take 5 over 8 and compare it to 6 over 10, 5 over 8 ends up being the bigger number, so we know that 5/8 cannot be between 0.5 and 0.6. So now let's look at 0.7. So 0.7, how can I write that as a fraction? Well, I can write that as a fraction because 0.7 is equal to 7 over 10. So now what I want to do is I want to compare 5 over 8 to 7 over 10. So I want to get a common denominator. All right, so how am I going to get a common denominator here? All right, well, what I want to do is I want to multiply the top and the bottom number of 7 over 10 both by 8. Now, 7 times 8 is what? 56. 8 times 10 is 80. All right, so what is a bigger number? 56 or 50? Well, hopefully you see that 56 is a bigger number. So basically, we can see here that 48 over 80 is smaller than 50 over 80, but 56 over 80 is bigger than 50 over 80. So again, if we go back to our original fractions here, we see that 5/8 is bigger than 6 over 10, but it's smaller than 7 over 10. So therefore, we know that C is the right answer, because we know that 5/8 is smaller than 0.7, but it's bigger than 0.6. All right, so this question's a little tricky. Maybe watch this one again if you had trouble with it, because this is an important skill to understand. The next question, which of the following is true? A, B, C, or D? Let's have you pause the video, think about this one, and then when you're ready, we'll go over how to do this question. Okay, so this question is just testing you on how well you understand basic math, signs, and symbols and their translations. So let me put this big table up on screen here, and if you had trouble with this question, it wouldn't hurt to pause the video and put these down in your notes. Basically, if I read A out loud, if I translate the symbols to math words, this would say 88 is greater than 109, which is false. That is not true. C would read as 109 is less than 88, and 109 is bigger than 88, so C is wrong. Now B would read as 88 does not equal 109, which is true. So B is the right answer here. And like I said, if you had trouble with this, don't worry about it for right now. We're just practicing. Definitely study this table that I have on the screen, and then when you're ready, we'll go on to the next question.
If the area of a circle is 200, what is the diameter? Please write your answer in the box below. Now, you obviously can't write your answer in the box below through the screen, but imagine if you could. And I want you to pause the video, try to figure this one out. This is a tough one. Whenever you're ready, we'll go over it. And like always, don't worry if this question's hard. We're just going to learn how to do it. Okay, so let's learn how to do this question now. So the formula is of a circle. It's area of a circle equals pi r squared. So we need to use this formula to get the right answer. Now, r is the radius of a circle. So the radius of a circle, and this is a pretty bad drawing of a circle. It actually looks more like an orange, but hopefully my bad drawing skills help make this more memorable for you. But if I were to measure half of the circle, that's what we call the radius. And if I were to measure the entire circle, and this actually is an even worse circle, but just pretend this is a circle. You have to be really open-minded to watch my videos because some of my examples are just very out there. But imagine this was a circle. If I measured across the entire circle, that would be the diameter. So we can say that the radius is half of the diameter, and the diameter is double the radius. All right, so the point here is what we're going to do is we're going to use the formula for the area. We're going to figure out what the radius is, and we're going to double it. That simply tells us what the diameter is. So fortunately, we already know the area of the circle. It's 200. So I can say, let me write it over here. 200 equals pi r squared. So we can divide by pi on both sides. And why would I want to divide by pi on both sides? Well, the reason is because I want to get the radius by itself. So I want to kind of clear the pi's out of the road here. Now, another thing that you should know is that pi is, you can think of it as being equal to 3.14. It's actually not. It's equal to 3.14 and then a ton of other numbers. But you could just think of it roughly as being equal to 3.14, although technically it's not. But that's beside the point here. Coming back to the question here, we can cancel the pi's out here. Over here we have 200 pi. All right, now you could take this pi out and replace it with 3.14. All right, if you want to, but I'm just going to leave it as the pi symbol for right now. And when I rewrite this so that we can see it more clearly here, I rewrite it. We've got 200 divided by pi equals r squared. So even if you're completely lost or have been up until this point in the video, I want you to ask yourself right now, 200 divided by pi equals r squared. How would I solve this for r? And we've talked about this in the example with triangles, I think it was, earlier in the video. And now we have it's a different scenario, but it's a very similar idea. So the answer is that if we want to get just r, we have to take the square root of both sides. All right? The square root of r squared is just equal to r. So we now have the square root of 200 over pi is equal to the radius. And we don't want to find, so we need to find the radius, but the final answer, we need to know what the diameter is for the final answer here. So fortunately, we already know that the radius is equal to half of the diameter, and that the diameter is equal to twice the radius. So if I double this number here, the square root of 200 over pi, if I double that, it's going to give me the diameter. So I would say that the diameter is 2 times the square root of 200 divided by pi. So if I put this in my calculator and I do the square root of 200 divided by pi multiplied by 2, the answer you should have would be 15.96. Maybe you rounded it a little bit different. I don't really care for now. I just want you to have either gotten this, 2 times the square root of 200 divided by pi, or 15.96, or an answer very close to this if you round it a little bit differently. And you might be wondering, on the test, how will the answer choices be? Are the answer choices going to have the pi symbol in the answer, or are they going to be a numerical value like this? The answer is that it depends on how they do the test. It might be a number. They might also leave pi in the answer choices. It could be either way, so be ready for both. And really, either way, you just have to remember pi is 3.14. Again, that's not technically mathematically correct. There's a bunch of other numbers on it too, but all you really need to remember is it is 3.14 for the purposes of the GED test. And I know this is a hard question, so give yourself a pat on the back just for trying this. If you got it right, fantastic work. If not, fantastic job for trying. Mr. Burns wants to take his wife and children to the movies. Both children are under 13 years old. Each child will bring one friend along of the same age. The ticket prices are shown in the table below. Children under 13 years old, $5 each for a day show, $7 each for a night show. Then we have over here, adults and teens 13 years old and up, $12 each for a day show, and $15 each for a night show. Now, if Mr. Burns is buying the tickets, how much money will he save on the cost of the tickets if they attend a day show instead of a night show? Please disregard sales tax in your answer. A, $44, B, $58, C, $14, or D, $16. Let's have you pause the video, try to figure this out, and then when you're ready, we'll go over it. Okay, so basically here, let's take stock of how many people we have here. So A represents adults. So we have 2 adults here. We've got Mr. Burns and his wife. And as far as the children go, we know that he has 2 children, because it tells us that both are under 13, and each child is going to bring one friend of the same age. So as far as children that are under 13, we know that we're going to have 4 here. So what we have to do here is we have to calculate the cost in total that he's going to pay for a night show and the cost for a day show, and we're going to subtract them. All right, so let's start with night here. So to calculate the cost at night, we would have to say, well, there are 2 adults going, And at night, the cost for an adult is 15 bucks. So I would want to do 2 times 15. Now I'm going to add that to the cost of the children. So how much does he have to pay for the children? Well, think about it. There are 4 kids that he's going to be taking to the movies, and the cost for one kid would be $7. All right, so we would do 7 times 4 here. And if you just plug this all into your calculator, you'll see that the cost for a night show is going to be $58. So that's how you would do night. Now, the process for day is basically the same thing here, except it's going to be different numbers. So again, we have to add up the cost of the adults and the cost of the children, but this time we're looking at the prices from the day. So there's 2 adults, there's him and his wife, and the cost for one adult for a day show would be $12. And we're going to now add the cost that he's going to pay for the children. So again, we have 4 children still, and the cost for one child would be $5. All right, so again, we can plug this in the calculator, do 2 times 12 plus 4 times 5, and we'll get $44. So now what we have to do is we have to take the cost of a night show in total, which is 58, and the cost in total of the day show, which is 44, and we have to subtract them. And if we subtract them, we get C as our answer. Kate's parents let her start her own lemonade stand to sell lemonade to the neighbors. During which period did her earnings increase the most? A. April through May, B. June through July, C. May through June, or D. March through April. And we have a graph over here. It says Kate's lemonade stand profits from January through July. Now on our vertical axis, we see the monthly earnings. On the horizontal axis, we see the months. And so I'll turn it over to you to pause the video, give this one a shot, and then we'll go over how to do it. Okay, so one of the key words in this question is the word increase. And we want to look on the graph, meaning the blue line here, and we want to look at each period here and find the one that had the biggest increase. So let me first identify the period April through May. So I find April down here, and I find May right here. So to determine what happened between April and May, the only thing that I need to look at is what's happening on the line in between the months through April and May. Now, if you were to imagine a little stick figure person starting at the leftmost part of the line, and imagine this blue line here is a hill. If the person were to follow the line, which direction would they be going? Well, hopefully you can see that if they just ran on this line, they'd be going downhill. That means that there is a decrease between April and May. And so we can take April and May, answer choice A, out right away because we're trying to find the period that had the biggest increase. So what about June through July? So to do that, let me start by finding June. And obviously you're not going to be able to write lines like this on your test, but I'm just kind of showing you how to check the period through June and July. All you have to do is check what's happening on the graph in between June and July. So to check June and July, I don't care about what's happening with the graph over here. I just need to look between this period right here. Now again, if we imagine that we had a little stick figure person and the person was going to start at the leftmost part of the graph and follow the line, they would be running downhill, which means a decrease. So from June to July, we know that there was a decrease. So we can take B out as well here. So let's check answer choice C, May through June. So again, you want to first identify the part of the graph that is going to be relevant to answering the question. So here's May, and June looks kind of like right here. Okay, so now here's the point that we want to get at here. So from May through June, if we start over here at the leftmost part of the line, which would be May, and now, what if our stick figure person were to just follow this line right here? Which direction would they be going? Well, now we can see the person would have an uphill battle right here. They'd have an uphill climb. So we do see that there would be an increase from May to June. But let's look at March and April too. So if we look, here's March, here's April. So if we just focus on what's happening with this part of the blue line right here between March and April, and we give it the stick figure test, if the stick figure starts right here at March and just follows the line towards April, they would also be going uphill. So we know that there was an increase in March and April. But the question is, which had the biggest increase? Well, one other way to think about this is which hill would be harder to climb, this little hill right here or this big hill right here? Well, just by the eyeball test, it looks like the hill from May to June would be harder to climb. All right, and we can verify this with the numbers too. So let me get the stick figures out of the road here, and I'll show you what I mean. So let's look at May here. So May is about here, all right? So what's the numerical value for May? So if I start at May and I kind of draw a line all the way over here, I see that I would land somewhere in between 10 and 5, but closer to 10. So let's say that it was maybe $8 in May. All right, and again, I can't tell the exact number, but I'm just guessing it's about 8. So let's look at June. So right here was June. That looks like it's exactly at 25. So here's 25 right here. Let me just mark that down. All right, and so if we look at March and April, March right here, if I look over here on the left, I see that that is maybe $2, maybe? Something like that. So let's say in March she made $2. And from April, which is right here, if I trace April over here, I see that it's almost 10. It's not quite 10. So let me just call that 9. Now, I can subtract the values here. So I can do what is 25 minus 8? So 25 minus 8 is 17. So I see that there was a $17 increase from the start of the month at May till June. She had a $17 increase. And if I look at where she was at in March and look at where she was at in April, and I do 9 minus 2, 9 minus 2 is 7. So it looks like she had a $7 increase from March to April. So clearly the biggest increase was C. So what I want you to take away from this is that, you can do a question like this in two ways. You can actually put numbers to it, or you can just kind of use the eyeball test, and the eyeball test of just thinking, hey, this is going downhill, so I don't have to look at that. This is going uphill, this is going uphill. This hill is bigger, so the biggest increase was May through June. Two different ways to do it, up to you to decide which way makes the most sense to you.
Ryan invested $1,200 for 2 months at a 10% interest rate. How much interest did he earn on his money? Parker must know me well because I love questions dealing with money and interest. As my students know, this is the way to make you really, really rich. So compound interest, a beautiful thing. But we're actually doing simple interest here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take $1,200 and we're going to divide that by 10%. Okay, so let's just think. If I take 12 and I just move the decimal point over, that's dividing it. So that gives us $120, which is actually not per month, it's per year. It's called annual percentage rate. Maybe you've heard that. That means that the 120 is actually broken down into 12 months. So we're going to divide the 120 by 12 and we get a nice easy 10. So he's making $10 per month. How many months is he doing it? 2, right? So we're going to say $10 times 2 equals $20. So he is making $20 in simple interest.
Jay wrestled in 8 matches. He scored 2, 1, 8, 0, 12, 4, 1, and 12 points during each match, respectively. What was Jay's average number of points scored in these 8 matches, rounded to the nearest whole number? A, 9, B, 5, C, 2, or is it D, 12? Let's have you pause the video, give this one a shot, and then when you're ready, we'll go over how to do it. Okay, so we're trying to find the average here. And we talked about mean earlier in the video, and we said that mean means the average. And so mean and average are 2 words for the same thing, but that's all we're doing here is we're finding the average. And the way that we do that is we want to add all the numbers up, and then what we're going to do is we're going to divide by the total number of numbers in the set. Okay, so all I'm doing here is, again, I took all of these numbers here. I'm going to add them all up, which I'm doing up here. And I'll throw parentheses around all of this. And so I'd add all of these numbers up. And then down here, I'm going to divide by the total number of numbers. And so we know that he wrestled in 8 matches. And we have 8 numbers here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So all you do is you add these all up in your calculator. You can divide by 8. And the answer you should get is 5. So hopefully that makes sense.